Alright, so if you've been watching my videos here on YouTube, you know I keep and breed ball pythons like this one around my neck. This is Bobby, my bamboo ball python, and I produce about 100 hatchlings a year. In addition to breeding ball pythons, I also breed rodents as food for these guys. I produce quite a few rodents. It's pretty amazing. I can have like up to 150 snakes in this room, and they eat one rodent per snake per week. So you're talking about a pretty insane amount of rodents that these guys can burn through in a short amount of time. And what I pretty much have done from the beginning in my reptile business here, I started really slow, bought really high-end racks like the racks behind me, these ARS caging racks, pretty much just 1 or 2 levels at a time. In some cases I'd buy like half a rack, but mostly it's been a really slow progression, really buying the high-end stuff. And now that I'm a few years down the road, I actually have money coming in from the sales of the hatchlings that I can reinvest back into my ball python reptile breeding operation. And today I want to kind of show you what I've invested in lately as far as what I invested in on the rat side of things. So the last couple of videos, you know, I just bought a new snake and I bought a couple levels of an ARS to put in a separate room as a quarantine area. So that's kind of my investments on the snake side. But I want to show you what I invested in on the rat side of things, and I made a pretty big investment on kind of dealing with the rats. So essentially what I was doing with the rats and the mice is when I first started out, I was producing just enough rats and mice to feed my collection, and I was always trying to balance the supply and demand. And then I got to the point where it was really tough to kind of balance it all. So what I did from there is I decided I want to produce an excess of rats and mice, and then everything extra I can freeze and sell to the pet store. Essentially what I do is I euthanize with CO2, then I put them in the freezer, and then when I have so many, I just send the pet stores a message and say, hey, I have all these rats and mice, are you interested? And they will buy as many, pretty much as many as I can produce. The pet stores go through an incredible amount of rodents. It's pretty amazing. And rodents in the freezer is like money in the bank if you're not familiar with the whole rodents and the reptile side of the business. It's pretty incredible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you first my freezer that I bought to house all my frozen rodents. First, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick tour of the room to kind of show you my snakes and my rats, kind of the high-end professional stuff that I have here. And then we'll go over to the garage and I'll show you my big new freezer. All right, so I'll give you a quick tour of my reptile room here. Over here, this is an ARS 5040 rack, and these are some of my holdbacks from last year, some of my males, some of my females that I purchased and I'm growing out. Over here is my hatchling rack that is filling up pretty quick. I have some eggs hatching, and these are the first eggs that I've hatched. Some little baby snakes over here, and I have about 70 eggs in the incubator, so that's going to fill up really quick. Over here are all my female ball pythons on the top and on the bottom. And then over here on this side, these are my rodents. These are, I have quite a few rodents in these tubs. These are all rats over on this side. These are all, this is like an ARS grow out rack, and I actually prefer the bigger tubs, and I put the males with the females pretty much full time, and then just keep pulling the babies out and put the babies in the grow out tubs, or I feed them off or put them in the freezer. And then on the bottom over here, these are like smaller rat tubs. These are actually called breeder tubs. So essentially I think what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to put the males and the females in these tubs, and then when the females get pregnant, you're supposed to move them over there. But I pretty much leave them full time, and then I pull the babies as they produce them. Then on the top are my 2 rows of mice. And on these, I've been having a problem with my water nozzles, and I pretty much went to water bottles because I ordered some new water nozzles from Stromberg's Chickens, like, I think it was like a month and a half ago, and somehow they lost my order even though I paid through it on PayPal, and it's been a nightmare. Then we found the order and then reordered it, and I just emailed them. They still haven't shipped them, it looks like. So I'm still trying to get water nozzles for my mice, and they need a special water nozzle that is more sensitive so the little baby mice can actually drink from the water nozzles. So essentially that is my setup. I have big food bins in the back that, you know, I fill them up like once a week, and it feeds them pretty much from the top so none of the food gets spoiled. Then I have big water jugs jugs on the top that feed the whole racks with water through all the water nozzles. It is really easy setup, let me tell you. When I had aquariums, it was like I got my life back when I went to these racks, because it's virtually no work except going through once a week, or you know, sometimes a couple times a week, and cleaning them all. It depends on how many rats I have and how crowded they are. You know, typically I'll do once a week, but if I have a lot of rats, sometimes it takes a 2 time a week cleaning on these. So from here, this is essentially where all my rats come from. So from here, let's go over to the garage and I'll show you my freezer. All right, so this is my new freezer. I have it kind of jammed in or over here in the garage with all my other junk. This used to be my old freezer that I was keeping all my rats in. And the problem with this freezer was it was not very energy efficient. You can see it's kind of falling apart here. Doesn't have much insulation. It was taking a lot of power to run this. And the other problem is if I had rats on the bottom, it was almost impossible to get to them if I filled the whole freezer. I had some stuff in there that I didn't even know I had when I emptied it out. So essentially what I did is I retired this old freezer and went to this one. This is actually the biggest one that I think it was Home Depot or Lowe's that sold me this. This is the biggest upright freezer that they actually made, and it is the bomb, let me tell you. Has a little lock here so you can lock it, and if you open it up, you can see it has tons and tons of frozen rats. These are all my frozen rats in here. You can see I have some big rats and some smaller rats in here. Yeah, this is, you know, the pet stores love these. I probably have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of dollars of rats in this freezer. It's pretty much filling up. I have an incredible amount already, and then, you know, I haven't even, actually I just had a big order and they bought a ton of rats. I couldn't believe it, and I still have a whole bunch of rats in here. So what I'm thinking about doing is actually getting another freezer. You know, you can kind of see I have some other food items in here, and I kind of want to get my personal stuff out of here and into a separate freezer so I don't have to mix it in here with the rats. Not that it really matters, but you know, you don't want your kids or your family coming over and, you know, moving the rats to pull out a lasagna, you know. It's just kind of weird having them, you know, it's really, I think it's good to actually have them separate. And then I have a lot of stuff in here. You know, this shelf here is, I would say it's mostly, you know, my steaks, my beef steaks and everything else. So I kind of got a mix of stuff in here. I really want to get it separated. But these freezers, I'd say they are about, I think I paid about $700 delivered. It's the biggest one they make. But the cool thing about this freezer is that if the power goes out, it will last for 2 days frozen. You know, so it's got super thick walls that are super insulated, and it'll last a long time if the power goes out, which is really cool. Another cool thing is that I have, the weird thing is when you close it, it like sucks a vacuum, and it's really hard to open. It's pretty crazy. And the other thing I have in here, somewhere in here, I actually have a temperature probe somewhere. I'm not even exactly sure where I put the probe, but I put the probe in here somewhere. I think it was on one of the shelves, and I monitor the temperature with a remote alarm, and it's basically a temperature sensor with an alarm. Let me show you that real quick. All right, so I actually bought a control unit that monitors the temperatures of not only this freezer, but it also measures the freezer in my kitchen, and you can see it is -13, -17. So this one's actually -17. And you can see the temperature has been from -9 to -17, so there's a little bit of variability in there. I actually have an alarm. I think it's like -2. So if this thing starts warming up and it goes to -2, the temperature alarm, and I won't lose any frozen food. All right, so another thing I purchased for my rats specifically is this Yeti Cooler. I don't know if you've heard about the Yeti coolers. It is pretty amazing. Look at how thick the walls are on here. And let me tell you, this is not your $50 cooler from Walmart or Kmart. It is the bomb. And I would say the Yetis are kind of like, it's kind of like the Porsches of coolers. Let me tell you, this thing was so expensive. This cooler was about, I'd say it was about $400 for this cooler. It's pretty insane to get something like that. And they claim to be bear proof. They have these latches right here. And essentially what I've been using these for is I can put my rats in there and, you know, drive down to town. I can run around. You know, if I sell some rats to like down to a city like 2.5 hours away, the rats are definitely not gonna thaw out by the time I get there. This thing is, this is pretty incredible. This happens to be a Yeti 65, and it's interesting, the 65 number is kind of meaningless because it's not really 65 quarts. It is, I'm not sure exactly how many. I think it's more like 50 quarts. It holds about 50 pounds of ice. And it's pretty heavy by itself. Let me tell you, if you add 50 pounds of ice in that cooler, it can get extremely heavy. And the cool thing about this is that I've actually tested this in my old freezer, and it actually fits in my freezer, and you can pre-cool it before you use it. So check this out. This was just kind of a coincidence that the Yeti fits perfectly in this little old freezer. So what I do is I unlatch the top and I put a little like paper towel in there so the lid stays propped open. I close this, and like the day before, I'll plug it in, and that cooler gets really ice cold on the inside and outside, and that is the key to a Yeti. Let me tell you, if you take a Yeti and you open the lid, you put it in the sun till the whole thing is 90 degrees inside and out, and you throw some ice in there, of course, you know, it's going to keep the heat in as well as the cold. So I've seen a lot of people really complain about the Yetis that, hey, I threw some ice in there. It only lasted for a couple hours and it was melted. And it's because it's similar to like a vacuum thermos, even though there's not a vacuum in this cooler, but you definitely have to have like a pre-cooled interior before you put anything in there. And when I actually load this up with my frozen rats, I don't really put any ice. I just pre-cool it in here, and then it is perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, the last time I did it, you know, the Reptile stores don't open till about 11. You know, if you have a day job, you're going down to the city, you're working until about noon. Maybe this sits in your hot car all day until noon. You know, you go to the pet store, and then this thing is going to be ice cold. Your rats are not going to be thawed. It is the perfect cooler for selling rats to pet stores. All right, so when it comes to business, I think I do it a little bit different than most people. The way I do it is I start small, grow really slow, and invest in really high-end equipment. I buy just a little bit at a time, and the kind of the reasoning behind that is I've seen some people jump into it, buy really cheap equipment. They fill their whole room with, you know, cheap snake racks and freezers. Maybe they have like a whole house or a warehouse full of stuff, and they get down the road, they get really well established, and then they start making some money from the hatchlings, and then they have to go through and replace all of the older equipment. As a matter of fact, I've seen a lot of people do these rodent racks over here out of wood and cement mixing tubs, and they really don't last that long. And a lot of times, you know, they'll go through and they'll tear them down and rebuild them multiple times, or what they'll do is they'll tear them down and they'll replace them with middle of the line racks, and then, you know, further on down the road they'll replace them a third time with really high-end stuff as their business matures. And I'd rather just get it out of the way at the beginning, grow a little bit slower, and, you know, get down the road and you have a really fantastic setup. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.